Okay. This is the Unpolished Man, the Unpolished Manuscript, Session 2. I'm going to read the first part again because I don't know if I got the rhythm right the last time, so we'll just start over again. Welcome home. Thank you for coming. Right now, if you can, just take a moment and a long, deep breath. And if it pleases you, just relax and get real comfortable. Because if you like stories, you now hold within your hands a magical, true life story. A story of stories told entirely from memory. About a universe, one soul's universe within the greater universe. A bubble of bubbles within the greater bubble. And like a rainbow, plumed, cosmic serpent eating its tail, it overlaps and weaves, loops and circles back on itself. May you enjoy good luck, good light in finding your own chosen path through the labyrinth, knowing that each time you enter, something new, a new path to the center is created, unique to only you and your footfalls, your choices and experience. Recognize that what you see, what you realize, is what you bring to the party. While this work is casting a spell of inspiration through you to both be the change we all seek and empower the dreamer to dream the great sacred dream, and the visionary to envision and create the highest future we all hope for and know we are all capable of bringing to life as the children play and the lovers within us love on, reaching higher, deeper, wider, soar. Who the heck do I think I am? Out of the blue, a woman that helped us scout for the World Rainbow Gathering in Brazil in 2003 sent me a message. In catching up, I'd mentioned working on this book, and she wrote back, "Autobiography? Isn't it another kind of ego trip?" And my response went something like, "Of course it's an ego trip. That is kind of the point, to leave a record of the journey, and in the process of learning from the process of writing it, hopefully provide something of value to everyone inspired to open and taste of a human life." For years, when I would encounter people that got a glimpse of what it must have been like to walk a mile in my shoes, I would hear them say that danged inimitable phrase, "You should write a book." And I would roll my eyes and say a vague, non-committal, "Sure," because I knew what it took to write a book. After it took 7 years writing Somewhere, 600 pages long, every page beginning with the word somewhere. I had thought this would have been the first book I would publish back in the mid-'80s, when the prospects for publishing involved an elaborate begging and prostrating ritual on the altar of blind sacrifice to the fickle attentions of the gatekeepers of culture and affluence. The idea of another undertaking, another ordeal, trial, campaign, nope. Wasn't really that interested in girding myself for battle again. And to tell it right, the idea of exposing myself to the world in this way seemed daunting, overwhelming, and alluring all at once. Enter the internet and the role of self-publishing on demand in democratizing the publishing process, enabling the long dreamt of end run around the wall of the gatekeepers to be able to bring works like these to you. Since finishing somewhere in 1987 and submitting it around in various forms and abbreviations to both traditional publishers and poetry award competitions, and paying the proverbial dues through the cliché of the collection of rejection letters from prestigious publishers, which for the aspiring writer is a step up from no response at all. But all that just resulted in the manuscript remaining unpublished and quote-unquote in storage. But for the series of paintings that ended up with pages of the somewhere text painted across them, that somehow found a certain popularity among those that were lucky enough to have caught me during my hand-painted t-shirt phase, 1987 to 1994, when I graduated to framed prints as the reproduction technology permitted from 2000 to 2007. So the good news is that from 1987 to 2007, I had taught myself how to paint and completed over 1,400 canvases up to that point. Published a 90-minute DVD of all the sacred geometry paintings I created since 1995 until 2007. And in the fall of 2007, I had self-published 5 books in 3 months. I was finally realizing my potential as a prolific creator of content, what the licensing people like to call IP, intellectual property. And I was out of excuses for not writing the dang book. Richard Bach, author of Jonathan Livingston Seagull and Illusions, and one of my personal heroes, wrote in the intro to one of his books something about an idea bursting through your walls and refusing to leave until you give it your full attention. He talked about how reluctant he was to write at all, and when I read that back in the 1970s, I didn't understand what he meant until this year. Having authored and self-published 7 books over the past 8 months, I've been granted a unique insight to what it takes to write a book. If done right, it is one of the most physically demanding things one can ever undertake. The best description I've come up with so far is, it's like performing abdominal surgery on oneself without benefit of anesthesia. Your hands are all up in there, covered in you, as you feel around in there, groping around deep inside yourself, trying to put your bloody finger on it, grasp at it, and finally grasp it, pull it all out into the light of day for the whole world to take a good long look at its leisure, of course, and repeat until you get it all out, all of it, the heck out. Not done till you do. That's how it felt every day for the first month and a half. But then I came to realize the singular pleasure as later on this journey of self-discovery became a feast of emotional and personal revelation, as the satisfaction of just getting it said, getting it all down and out finally is enough. The gratification from this has few parallels. At that point, I wrote to my friend Flux Blossom, I am so way far into this now, the only way out is through. Because giving my focus to anything else but finishing the chronicle and taking care of myself physically seemed dark or deadening. The only light was to finish the journey, finish telling the story, complete the journey, and all would be revealed. All would take care of itself. Over the past few years, I've often found myself being interviewed about the course of my career as an artist, and was in the middle of such an interview that went on for some 90 minutes in November 2007 when I realized I should probably write it all down. In the process of doing so, I had to give some background and context, and that was the genesis of the Unpolished manuscript. Quote, some ego trips may actually be worth the journey, unquote, question mark. Painting my brains out in the Ansbarigo Desert in 1993, I began to experience a state of bliss and euphoria that went on 24/7 for 3 months. This I later came to call my spiritual acceleration. 3 days into this experience, I started reading Yogananda's Autobiography of a Yogi. A footnote around page 300 explained about the nature and metaphysics of the ambient sound I was hearing in the desert and everywhere else in the universe. This had a most profound impact on the direction my life would take thereafter. Errol Flynn's autobiography, My Wicked, Wicked Ways, was one of the inspiring books I thought about on the road, in part because it took him off the star pedestal and showed me a person like myself, struggling like the rest of us just to live. What impressed me was that his life before the movies was so full of real adventure and risk out of necessity that when the movies came along, it was all a cushy parody of all the real living he'd already done. In fact, by the time he got cast in his first film role as Fletcher Christian in an early silent version of Mutiny on the Bounty, he had already done more hardscrabble living than most people would ever do in several lifetimes. The movies were a vacation from the struggle he'd known before. When I found myself in similar bizarre and absurd adventures and circumstances all over the world that I never dreamed of for myself, it helped to know there were people like him that achieved higher goals than the struggles and dark places we find ourselves consumed by sometimes. Reading George Orwell's autobiographical work Down and Out in Paris and London gave me a similar appreciation for my circumstances versus achieving my higher goals, as I found myself down and out in Paris and London when I landed in Europe with $30 in August 1999 to see the total solar eclipse at the European Rainbow Gathering in Hungary, trying to get to the pyramids for the millennium. Jack Kerouac's autobiographical sketch of the Beat Generation in On the Road inspired me to start hitchhiking and jumping trains around the country in 1979. I read the first half before I started hitchhiking, and a year of hitching and jumping trains around the country later, I finally came back to read the second half, which by then seemed anticlimactic because by then I had my own stories to tell that were equally as intense and nostalgic and empty and lonely and frenzied and desperate and unforgettable, indescribably describable. Chuck Yeager's been one of my heroes since I first discovered reading for fun in 6th grade, and then over the next 3 years proceeded to entirely devour the World War II book sections of 3 libraries. So when his book Yeager came out, I couldn't get enough. He'd been the fighter pilot I'd always wanted to be. Reading Tom Wolfe's The Right Stuff and seeing the movie at the same by the same name so put its finger on what it was like being in the military family living in the orbit of an airbase in the early 60s during the Kennedy era and the beginning of the space race. It was all about the jets, and the people that flew them were the top of the heap. There was this tension that suffused everything at that time, and the pressure of this directly affected everyone right down to us little kids on the playground. It determined the pecking order, and as a child of color, I was the one on the bottom, looking up at those jets screaming across the sky with all that confidence, and I was in love. As an amateur historian, I enjoy reading the form of the autobiography, yet biography has shaped and inspired me also. Like the biographies of the Wright brothers, Wilbur and Orville, Nikola Tesla and Edison have all been profoundly influential in my life and are great reads as well. These 3 works I read in the early 90s helped me understand unique traits I inherited from both my mother and father. The intuitive traits of the tinkerer that my mother and father each possessed. My friend Carrie liked to kid me about being a little MacGyver, but what these four famous successful inventors had in common was the same thing I saw in my father's pursuit of his passion for ham radio and my mother's success at fixing the TV using kitchen utensils. Something about being able to learn from another's mistakes and successes. Film biographies in general and of any artist in particular are among my favorite things to find, to see how another faces what I face, how to be a human being, how to create something of genius and genuine benefit to the rest of the world, how to live a life of integrity and remain true and enjoy the journey, how to inspire and share inspiration, how to reach goals in a healthy way, how to achieve and enjoy lasting success and remain a good person inside and out, how to pass it all on in a good way, how to leave a lasting positive impact on the world and the universe. Well, that's my 15 minutes this time. Bless.